Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first story is titled, The Parking Wars, A Battle for Space in the City. Living in the city had its perks, but finding a parking spot was not one of them. I had an apartment in a lovely building with a private parking lot, which gave me 2 spots. However, my peaceful life was disrupted when a car started parking in front of mine every Friday afternoon, which left me unable to use my car during the weekends. It went on for 5 weeks, and I had to resort to leaving angry notes on the car, which had little effect. As time went by, the car thief became more daring, and started parking even during the weekdays. I decided to speak to the building management, who agreed to install cameras to monitor the parking lot. However, this did not deter the car thief, who found new ways to elude the cameras. They started covering the license plate or parking in spots where the cameras couldn't see. I was beyond frustrated, and it seemed like my only options were to keep leaving notes or call the police. But one day, while I was walking to my car, I saw a group of people with a tow truck trying to move the car parked in front of mine. They looked like vigilantes, and I knew that they were not authorized to tow the car. I decided to confront them, and they told me that they were tired of the car thief taking up space in the parking lot and that they were taking matters into their own hands. I knew that this was not the right way to handle the situation, and I warned them against doing anything illegal. I also told them that I had contacted the building management and they were working on a solution. The vigilantes left, but I couldn't help feeling anxious about the situation. I didn't want any trouble, and I certainly didn't want to get involved in any illegal activity. I decided to do some research and found out that there were laws and regulations for private parking lots. I also found out that there were towing companies that specialized in private parking lots, and they had the necessary equipment to tow cars from any level of the parking lot. I contacted one of these companies, and they assured me that they could remove any car from the parking lot, regardless of where it was parked. I also spoke to my neighbors, and they were supportive of my decision to take legal action. We all agreed to chip in and pay for the towing fees, and we waited for the next time the car thief parked illegally. Finally, the day came, and the car thief parked right in front of my spot on a Friday afternoon. I immediately called the towing company, and they sent a truck with the necessary equipment to tow the car. It was an intense operation, but they managed to tow the car from the 3rd level of the parking lot and impound it. The car owner was livid and accused me of theft and vandalism. However, I had followed all the necessary legal procedures, and I had the support of my neighbors. I provided the evidence to the authorities, and the case was settled in my favor. After that incident, there were no more cars parked illegally in the private parking lot. It was a victory for all the residents, and we could finally enjoy the peace of mind that came with having a secure parking spot. However, the car thief had not given up yet. A few months later, I woke up to find my car vandalized. The windows were smashed and the tires were slashed. It was a devastating sight, and I knew that the car thief was behind it. I contacted the authorities, but there was little they could do. I had no evidence that linked the car thief to the vandalism, and it seemed like I was back to square one. However, I didn't give up. I decided to take matters into my own hands and set up a surveillance camera in my parking spot. I purchased a high-quality camera with night vision and motion detection capabilities. I also installed a GPS tracker in my car just in case the car thief decided to strike again. A few weeks passed without any incidents, but one night I received an alert on my phone from the surveillance camera. I quickly checked the footage, and to my surprise, I saw the car thief breaking into my car. They smashed the window and started rummaging through my belongings. I immediately called the police and showed them the footage. They were able to track down the car thief and arrest them. It turned out that they were a professional car thief who had been stealing cars and breaking into them for years. They had no connection to the person who had been parking in front of my spot, and it was just a coincidence that they targeted my car. The car thief was sentenced to several years in prison, and I never had any problems with parking in the private lot again. I felt relieved and safe, knowing that I had taken all the necessary precautions to protect my car. In an update, the building management decided to hire a security guard to patrol the parking lot at night, and they also installed more cameras to monitor the entire lot. The residents were pleased with the new security measures, and we felt safer and more secure. In conclusion, it was a challenging experience, but I learned that there are legal ways to handle parking issues in private parking lots. It's essential to be vigilant and proactive in protecting our property, and not to resort to illegal activities or take matters into our own hands. I'm grateful that I was able to resolve the situation and that justice was served in the end. In my opinion, This story highlights the frustration that many city dwellers face when it comes to finding a parking spot. It's a relatable experience that can lead to some creative solutions, like using jacks to move a car parked illegally. However, it's important to remember that taking the law into your own hands is not the answer. The protagonist's decision to research and follow legal procedures was a smart move that ultimately led to a positive outcome. It's a great reminder that there are ways to solve problems without resorting to vigilante justice. The next story is titled, "The HOA Sued Me Over My Year-Round Garden, But We Fought Back and Won, A Story of Resilience and Triumph." My husband and I had always dreamed of owning our own home, and after years of saving, we finally found the perfect house in a beautiful neighborhood with a homeowners association, HOA. The neighborhood was well kept, and the HOA seemed like a great idea, but we soon realized that they had nothing better to do than harass people with different cultures and religions. My husband is an avid gardener and takes great pride in his work. Our house is always decorated with beautiful flowers and greenery. However, it wasn't long before we started receiving threatening letters from the HOA board members, stating that something he had outside was against policy or unsightly or distracting. We quickly realized that they were discriminating against us for our different culture and religion, even though he was Indian and I was white. The first time we received a letter, it was for a small statue of a Hindu goddess that my husband had placed in the garden. They claimed that it didn't maintain a harmonious relationship with the houses around it. We thought it was ridiculous, but we complied and removed the statue. But things only got worse from there. Every time my husband put up a new decoration or planted new flowers, we would receive another letter from the HOA. They claimed that his decorations were a nuisance to the neighbors, even though we knew for a fact that no one had complained. One day, my husband received a letter stating that he had to remove all of the decorations from our garden because they were against the HOA's rules and regulations. My husband was devastated. Gardening was his passion, and he couldn't bear the thought of removing all of his hard work. He decided to attend the next HOA meeting to voice his concerns. When we arrived, we were met with judgmental stares from the board members. My husband explained that the decorations were for religious purposes, but they didn't care. They dismissed us, stating that we had to pay a fine for the decorations that we hadn't removed. We tried to reason with them, but it was no use. They seemed to have it out for us, and we couldn't understand why. My husband was at a loss, but I wasn't going to let them get away with their discrimination. I started to research the HOA's rules and regulations and found that they were extremely broad and didn't specify any guidelines for garden decorations. I also found that the HOA had a history of discriminating against people of different cultures and religions. Armed with this information, we decided to take them to court. It was a long and stressful process, but we were determined to fight back against their discrimination. We hired a lawyer and presented our case to the judge. We had pictures of the garden decorations as well as evidence of the HOA's discriminatory practices. After hearing our case, the judge was appalled by the HOA's behavior. He agreed with our case of discrimination and awarded us a large sum of $39,000 in damages. We were elated. We had won against the HOA's discrimination. But our fight wasn't over yet. A few weeks after the court hearing, we received another letter from the HOA. They claimed that we owed them money for damage to the lawn during the court hearing. We knew it was just another attempt to get money out of us, so we took them to court again. This time, we were even more prepared. We had evidence that the damage to the lawn had been there before the hearing, and that the HOA was trying to extort us for money. The judge once again saw through their tactics and ruled in our favor. Not only did we not have to pay for the supposed damage, but the judge also ordered the HOA to pay our legal fees. The victory felt sweet, but it was bittersweet. We couldn't help but feel like we were still being singled out by the HOA. We noticed that other neighbors had similar decorations in their gardens, but they never received any letters or fines. It seemed like the HOA was still targeting us, even after our victory in court. We decided to take matters into our own hands and reach out to the other neighbors. We found out that many of them felt the same way we did, and were also being unfairly targeted by the HOA. We formed a neighborhood group to fight back against the HOA's discrimination. Together, we attended HOA meetings and presented a united front. We called out their discriminatory practices and demanded that they change their policies. We also reached out to local news outlets and brought attention to the issue. The HOA was finally forced to listen. They met with us and agreed to revise their policies to be more inclusive of different cultures and religions. They also agreed to drop all fines and fees that had been unfairly imposed on us and our neighbors. It was a long and difficult journey, but we had finally achieved what we set out to do. We had fought back against discrimination and won. Our garden was once again filled with beautiful decorations, and we could finally enjoy our home without fear of harassment from the HOA. But our fight had also inspired others. We received messages from people all over the country who had faced similar discrimination from their HOAs. We realized that our victory was just the beginning of a larger movement to fight against discrimination and prejudice. We continued to speak out against discrimination in our community and beyond. We shared our story and encouraged others to fight back against injustice. We even started a nonprofit organization to support those who were facing discrimination from their HOAs. Our victory had not only changed our lives, but had also inspired others to stand up for their rights. We were proud to be a part of something bigger than ourselves and to have made a positive impact on the world. In my opinion, this story is a great example of how standing up against discrimination and injustice can make a real difference. It's heartening to see how the protagonist and their neighbors refused to be bullied by the HOA and fought back against their unfair policies. It's also inspiring to see how their victory led to a larger movement against discrimination. This story shows that even in the face of adversity, it's possible to make positive changes in the world if we stand together and fight for what's right. The next story is titled, Standing Firm for My Seat. I was looking forward to my lunch break and decided to try out a new cafe near my office. As I entered, I noticed it was quite busy, but luckily there was a spot at the end of a communal table. I ordered my food and settled in to enjoy my meal. Soon, 2 women asked if they could sit next to me. I happily obliged, leaving an empty seat between us. However, things took a turn when 2 more customers came in and asked me to move so they could sit together. I was taken aback by their request. After all, I had already accommodated the 2 women and I had arrived before any of them. Why should I have to move? I politely refused, explaining that I had been there first and had already made room for the other customers. But they were not willing to listen. They started giving me dirty looks and whispering to each other. I tried to ignore them and focus on my food, but their behavior was making me uncomfortable. Suddenly, one of them snapped at me, calling me selfish and inconsiderate. I couldn't believe it. I was simply trying to enjoy my meal and had already made concessions for the other customers. I stood my ground and calmly explained that I had every right to be there. However, the other customers were not willing to back down. They kept insisting that I move, and their voices grew louder and more aggressive. I started feeling intimidated and vulnerable as the entire cafe was now looking at me. It was at this point that the manager of the cafe stepped in. She asked what was going on, and I explained the situation. To my surprise, she took the side of the other customers, saying that it would be more convenient for them to sit together. I was shocked and outraged. I had paid for my food and had every right to enjoy it in peace. But the manager wouldn't budge. She started insisting that I move and even threatened to call the police if I didn't comply. At this point, I was feeling overwhelmed and helpless. I didn't know what to do. That's when a regular customer spoke up. She had been sitting at a table nearby and had witnessed the entire exchange. She came over and stood by my side, saying that she had seen me make room for the other customers, and that I was in the right. This seemed to make the manager reconsider. She apologized for the misunderstanding and offered to buy me a drink on the house. I accepted, but I couldn't shake off the feeling of injustice. As I sat there sipping my drink, I thought about what had just happened. I had stood up for myself, but it had come at a price. I wondered how many other people had been in similar situations and had been forced to give up their rights. Days went by, and I couldn't stop thinking about the incident. Finally, I decided to take action. I wrote a letter to the cafe's management explaining what had happened and suggesting that they implement a policy to prevent such situations from occurring in the future. To my surprise, I received a response within a few days. The management apologized again and said that they had discussed the matter with their staff. They promised to create a policy that would ensure that customers would be treated fairly and with respect. But the most satisfying outcome came a few weeks later. I returned to the same cafe for lunch, and as I was paying my bill, the manager approached me. She apologized again for what had happened and told me that they had implemented a new policy that guaranteed customers the right to keep their seats if they had arrived first. I was pleased and relieved. It felt good to know that my actions had made a difference and that I had helped to create positive change. I left the cafe with a sense of pride and empowerment. knowing that I had stood up for myself and for others who might find themselves in similar situations. But the story didn't end there. A few weeks later, I returned to the same cafe for lunch. As I walked in, I noticed that the communal table had been replaced by smaller, individual tables. I smiled to myself, knowing that my letter had helped to create real change. As I sat down at one of the new tables, I overheard a conversation between two customers. They were talking about the incident that had happened a few weeks ago, and how the cafe had implemented a new policy as a result. One of the customers turned to me and said, "Hey, aren't you the one who stood up for your seat?" I smiled and nodded, feeling proud that my actions had made an impact on the community. It was a small victory, but it had taught me an important lesson. Sometimes standing up for yourself and for what is right can make all the difference. Update. A few months later, I received an email from the manager of the cafe. She thanked me again for bringing the issue to their attention and for helping to create a positive change. She also invited me to meet with her and the staff to discuss further improvements that could be made to ensure that all customers felt welcome and respected. I accepted the invitation, and we had a productive discussion about ways to create a more inclusive and supportive environment. We talked about things like training staff to be more sensitive to customers' needs, providing resources for customers who might need extra assistance, and creating a more diverse and inclusive menu. It was an inspiring conversation, and I left the cafe feeling grateful and hopeful. It was a reminder that sometimes small actions can have big consequences, and that standing up for yourself and for others can create positive change that ripples out into the world. In my opinion, this story is a great example of the importance of standing up for oneself. It's frustrating to be in a situation where you're being pushed around and made to feel uncomfortable, but it's empowering to see someone who is able to hold their ground and assert their rights. The fact that the author was able to make a positive change by speaking up and taking action is a testament to the power of individual action. It's a reminder that even small actions can have a big impact, and that we all have the ability to make a difference in the world. The last story is titled, "The Time My Neighbor Called Cops and Tried to Get Me Arrested for No Reason." Background. My husband and I moved into our new house in a quiet suburban neighborhood in September of 2021. We were excited to start a new chapter in our lives, but little did we know that our neighbor from hell, NFH, would make our lives a living nightmare. From the start, NFH was an issue. She had already come down to our house to try and claim that her lease included our personal laundry room, which was obviously not the case. She had even admitted to trying to break into our house to use our laundry facilities. It was clear that she was not going to be an easy neighbor to deal with. Fast forward to February of 2022, my husband and I returned home after being out of state for a few days. We rented a car for the trip, and when we arrived home, we found that the snow had piled up to around 2 feet. NFH hadn't bothered to clear any snow, which meant that we couldn't park in the driveway. My husband started clearing the sidewalks while I waited in the car. As he was doing so, I noticed NFH glaring at me from her window with an intense and menacing look. Once my husband finished clearing the sidewalks, including hers, we emptied our rental car and went inside to change before he could shovel the driveway. However, before he could start shoveling, NFH's dad showed up and blocked our everyday driver in with their Suburban. He immediately began to insult and belittle my husband, calling him a punk-ass little crap, and claiming that he deserved respect because he was 50 years old. It was clear that this man was trying to intimidate us, but my husband refused to back down. The situation escalated quickly, and NFH's dad claimed that my husband had threatened to assault him. I quickly grabbed my phone and started recording the altercation as her dad continued to make outrageous claims. Meanwhile, NFH was screaming and crying, holding her baby and claiming that she was being assaulted. It was a complete and utter overreaction, and we knew that it was only a matter of time before the police showed up. As we had suspected, 3 police officers showed up, and they were clearly familiar with NFH. They tried to talk her down, but she wouldn't listen. She kept screaming and demanding that I be arrested, claiming that I was a prostitute and that they needed to arrest me. It was an outrageous and baseless claim, but she wouldn't let it go. The police eventually spoke to us and told us that they would likely be evicting NFH soon. However, things only got worse from there. NFH continued to act entitled, and we soon found out that she had been spreading rumors about us to our other neighbors. Days later, we received a notice from our homeowners association, HOA, claiming that we had violated several rules and regulations. It was clear that NFH had made false claims about us to the HOA, and we knew that we had to take action. We decided to hire a lawyer to help us deal with the situation, and we eventually were able to clear our names. It turned out that NFH had been spreading lies and rumors about us to other neighbors as well, and we knew that we had to take action to protect ourselves. Update. Months later, we found out that NFH had been evicted from her home due to multiple violations of her lease agreement. We were relieved to hear this news, but we also knew that we had to be vigilant in the future to ensure that we were not victimized again. We learned a valuable lesson from this experience and knew that we had to be prepared to stand up for ourselves and protect our home and our reputation. After the incident with NFH, we took extra precautions to ensure that we were always documenting any interactions with our neighbors. We installed security cameras around our property and made sure to keep records of any disputes or confrontations. We also made an effort to get to know our other neighbors better and build stronger relationships with them. Over time, we were able to move on from the ordeal with NFH, but it was not easy. We had to deal with the aftermath of her false accusations and the damage that it did to our reputation. However, we were determined to not let her actions define us, and to show that we were good neighbors who respected the rules and regulations of our community. In the end, we were able to come out stronger from this experience. We learned the importance of standing up for ourselves and protecting our rights as homeowners. We also learned the value of having a strong support system in the form of our other neighbors and our lawyer. We hope that our experience can serve as a cautionary tale for others who may be dealing with difficult neighbors and encourage them to take action to protect themselves and their homes. In my opinion, this story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of dealing with difficult neighbors. It's amazing how one person's actions can have such a negative impact on those around them. The fact that NFH tried to frame the narrator for a crime they didn't commit is outrageous and shows just how far some people will go to get what they want. It's great to see that the narrator took action to protect themselves and their home, and that justice was eventually served. Overall, this story is a reminder that we should always be prepared to stand up for ourselves and protect our rights, especially when dealing with difficult neighbors. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.